I'm just kidding. This box is empty. We installed it already. Now, by the time you see this, it's already going to be past Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers, by the way. And this year, what I wanted to do for my wife was hook up her 4Runner with a roof rack. She has been asking for a roof rack for a while now, and I think it's about that time. Now, prior to this, we've been discussing roof racks. Like, I've been trying to feel her out on what kind of style she likes, what she wants to use it for, and what she wants to see on the 4Runner. And we know two things. Number one, she wanted something that was simple and clean, something that's low profile. You know there's a roof rack there, but it's not screaming out at you with humongous baskets or really tall sidewalls. Just something that is there that is usable without it screaming to you, oh my God, look at me, I have a roof rack. Number two, we've already come to the consensus, sort of, that we are not going to be mounting a rooftop tent to this thing. Like, when we take the 4Runner out, the end goal is to one day be towing a travel trailer with it and then using the roof rack just for cargo. If you were to look at my Jeep with the rooftop tent sitting on my roof rack is basically unusable except for the sides. I can't put anything in my roof rack anymore because the rooftop tent is there, and that's not something we wanted to have on the 4Runner. We wanted to use the 4Runner to be able to carry paddle boards, kayaks, cargo boxes, water ports, whatever. We wanted to still have that space on top of the runner to carry all of our items. With these two parameters in mind, I narrowed it down to two racks, the Prinsu or the FrontRunner Slimsport rack. Both the Slimsport and the Prinsu have that low profile design that my wife is looking for, and it also runs in that budget of about $1,000 to $1,250. I went with FrontRunner because FrontRunner just has a ton of different accessories for their racks. Not to mention, that is already the ecosystem that I run on the Jeep. Meaning, if I needed to move something from the Jeep over to my wife's 4Runner, it's a lot easier to kind of move those things over because it's the same kind of rack system. Now, on the FrontRunner side of things, I had two options for racks there as well. Either their slimline rack, which is what I have on the Jeep, and for the 4Runner, I think it runs about $1,500, or their brand new Slim Sport rack, which is about $900. Now, I really wanted the slim line rack to be put on the 4Runner. That way, that will really make transferring all of our accessories easier, like awnings and shovel and things like that would be so much easier to move from one vehicle to the other. But my wife was just not feeling that slim line. Like, she thought it was too boxy and it stuck up too much. Plus, also, we knew that if we're not going to put a rooftop tent on the 4Runner, then having the slimline rack would just be overkill. See, the slimline rack has a higher weight capacity, meaning you can put a rooftop tent on there and a bunch of other heavier items, and we knew we were just never going to be doing that. It was really just for cargo and kayaks and paddle boards. Now, the Slim Sport does not have the same kind of weight capacity that the slimline has. It's much, much lower, so you're not going to want to put a rooftop tent on that, but it's perfect for just like regular cargo. Honestly, the new FrontRunner Slim Sport rack just checks all the boxes. It has that low profile look that my wife likes. It's less than $1,000. With shipping, it came out to like $978. And it has the weight capacity that we need without it being overkill. But anyway, we already installed this rack this past weekend. So let me take you back to the install, show you how we installed it, and then I'll give you my thoughts and review on how we're liking it. We're going to be doing the install at my friend's house because he has a garage, and fortunately this rig is not too tall yet to fit inside garages. No lift, no tires, so we can bring this into his garage. There's no room in mine. There's way too much stuff in my garage, and it is 86 degrees outside. So we're going to do it at his house. Should be a fun day with the guys. I cannot wait, so let's just go install. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is remove the old roof rack, and that's pretty easy. It's just popping these off with a trim removal tool, and then after that there are some bolts in there that will allow you to take this whole thing out. So we're going to lay out all the pieces on whatever side it's supposed to go. That way we won't get confused,
right? This way, so we don't scratch up the good side.
Yeah, facts. See, that's why we need you.
Look, it's already scratched up. I didn't do that.
So we unboxed this and all of that stuff is laid out, and I don't see any instructions anywhere. When we opened the box, all this was scattered inside the box, and I'm missing parts, man. Like there's missing bolts, missing washers. All the big pieces are all there, and I still don't even know why they put a wheel in there.
For real?
Yeah.
Bent. The lock is bent too.
Yeah, so I have a feeling the box was dropped at some point during shipping because all the bolts and nuts and everything were just all over the place. Went to Home Depot, bought some nuts and bolts there that I'm hoping will work. I'm gonna have to call FrontRunner, have them send me like an extra kit or something, and I'll just replace all the Home Depot stuff so that it all looks nice and neat. Kind of sucks, man. Like, I just wanted to install and be done, and now we had to make an extra trip. These rails are much thinner than mine. So this is the Sport, so it's gonna be a little thinner. Not gonna have as much weight capacity, but I think it looks pretty good. First thing is to attach the two parts together. Towards the back, we put in
Stiffener plate.
the stiffener plate right here,
Just any of these two
Goes
bolts.
right
No,
there,
it's the shorter one.
Shorter ones.
just to help
Gotcha.
kind of keep
Got it
all
right
this
here.
stiff. Stiffener plate, then there's a stiffener plate, a regular plate over here. This area goes into the stock holes of your old rack. That one goes in the stock holes of your old rack. But on the front, we add this plate, and then up here, we're gonna be cutting somewhere in here, and then that plate will sit in there, and that's the three areas where this rack will be held together. So one that we actually cut into, we have to drill a hole, and then you got non-drill on over there, and then non-drill at the back. All right, so we got everything pre-hooked up, locked up over there, one in the back, and then here is where we're gonna have to cut that rubber piece a little bit. So you're gonna be cutting here, and then we drill a hole underneath. This thing actually comes out really easily. It's not even glued down. So that's what's gonna go there. All right, so these guys are putting the rails onto the side brackets. Now, I just want to show you guys, we're kind of tapping it. In here, these are not tapped. Like there's no screw threads in there. The reason why is because the bolts that you actually use, they're meant to self-tap. Like you bring it in and you screw it in there, and then it'll self-tap its way into here. And that's what makes it a tight fit. But it's also pretty hard to do. So what Dennis is doing here is he's just getting it started at least to make it a little bit easier. Now for the front, the rail for that actually goes to the lower one and not the same height, because the holes for the top is for the wind fairing. Then you also get, for your light bar, if you get the light bar cut out, which is what I got, you have to put those in now, because there's no way for you to put a bolt in there later without having to take everything out. We did have to undo it because you have to put another bolt in there because the fairing has a center bracket that will go in there. So you have to put in a nut in there first before anything. So we're sliding a nut in. There you go. And then
This
your light bar bracket. Then lock it into place there on the lower end. So just don't forget that. Make sure you have that inside, and you have your 2 light bar mounts inside as well, because after you screw this in, there's no way to put it back in. Versus, let me show you guys. Here, what's cool about this system is they have these cutouts. So when you're ready to install stuff, you just put the bolt through here, and that way you don't have to like take anything out. It just your nut will just go right in there, and it'll just slide wherever you want. Now we're missing some of those bolts. That these bolts here, we're missing a ton of them. So we're only going to do some of the brackets now. I'm going to contact FrontRunner and have them send me more of those bolts so that we can put the rest of the rails on. So it can be really challenging to try to narrate and install and show you guys step by step of what we're doing when we have multiple guys working on different parts simultaneously. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to walk you through this and show you exactly what we did. That way everything that you just saw us do will make a little bit more sense. Starting out with the side brackets, you will find out that the side brackets come in 2 pieces. You're going to need to join the side brackets here, and there's a plate that comes with that. The reason why it's in 2 pieces is because it allows this thing to kind of flex. The 4Runner roof kind of curves a little bit, and if this thing is straight, then you're not going to get this lining up properly. So by this being able to flex a little bit, once you got the front and also this locked into place, it allows you to kind of angle this a little bit downwards to press it onto the roof. Now for the rails are attached to these side brackets by means of these M6 self-tapping screws. There's no thread inside these rails, so you basically put the screw in, start to turn it, and it will self-tap its way inside. It can get a little bit difficult, which is why we use the tapping device to get the thread at least started, or use an impact drill, and that will help get it through. Just if you're going to use an impact drill like we did, just be very, very careful that you don't strip some of these bolts. We're still missing a few rails here and there because I'm still waiting on FrontRunner to send me more of those self-tapping screws, because you can't get those at the hardware store. Then I'll be able to attach the 1, 2, and 3 more rails that I'm still missing. Now for the front though, as you can see, these are all attached at the top, but on the front, you're going to mount that rail right there to these holes down here. The reason why is because the holes at the top, that's for your wind fairing. Before you attach this rail, however, you're going to need to make sure you slide in a nut into there, because once you have this installed, there is no way anymore, it's all closed up, to attach a nut, to bring a nut inside there. There's no big hole in here to drop a nut in. In fact, with these, the way you put the nuts through is you put it through the side and it comes in that way. So you won't be able to have access to that anymore. So you're going to need to make sure you put in a nut there, and that's what holds the middle part of your wind fairing. And then if you're going to use a light bar, you need to also put those light bar mounts there. FrontRunner gives you 2 types of light bar mounts, and I figured this is the kind that I'm going to be using. I don't know for sure, but once I get my light bar, if these are not the kind, then I'm going to have to take all this out and put in the other brackets that they provide. Now once you've got the rail fully assembled, then you're going to want to put the entire thing on the roof. I wouldn't put the side rails first and then put the rails after that. I mean, I think you can try to do that, but we found it to be easier to just go ahead and put the whole rack together, and then with a whole bunch of people lift it on top of the 4Runner. And the way it attaches is, in the very rear, that attaches to the stock holes that were there already from the old roof rack. Also, in the middle over there, that also attaches by way of the stock mounting points. Now when you are putting these on, FrontRunner provides you with spacers. You're going to need to put 2 spacers into each one. There are 2 spacers underneath here. So there's 1 and 2, and that lifts up the rack high enough so that you're not scratching up the paint. So make sure you take those two spacers, you put two there, that helps lift it up above the paint. Same thing over here, I think it's a little bit more clear. You can see that there's two spacers underneath there as well. Now when you do mount the sides, they're gonna come with these stiffener brackets. You need to add these stiffeners in there because it helps prevent this from basically bending out. So this just acts as reinforcement. You get one here, one on the other side, and then you get one for the middle, and then one for the other side in the middle. The front ones does not have it. Okay, so now for the front. The best way to find out where you're going to drill is before the rack is fully assembled, just take the side, put a bolt there and a bolt there so you know that that's where it goes, and then you'll be able to follow it all the way here and then draw up a line where you're going to cut. You're then going to take that rubber piece that's there, it comes out really easily, and just cut two slats so that you have bare metal underneath, and then that's where you drill the hole. Now when you get the rack, you'll find that underneath the front brackets there's a piece of 3M tape. That 3M tape kind of helps you adhere the rack to the roof while you bolt it down, but the 3M tape also acts as a gasket against leaks. Well, we didn't notice that when we were installing it, those pieces of 3M tape on both sides fell out, and it was on the floor of my friend's garage. Next day we were driving it around, it was raining and it started to leak inside, so I had to put even more RTV silicone than I already had. So I had to double down on some RTV silicone. There's some inside here just to kind of help prevent more leaks. Now to mount the front brackets, you are going to need to drill into your roof. You're going to start with a small pilot hole and then build it up to be wide enough to fit the little jack nuts that they provide you. These jack nuts are sort of like riv nuts, except you don't need a riv nut tool. You basically just drop the jack nut in there and then you hold it down with one of these, this tool that they provide you with, and then you put the bolt through, and as you start to tighten the bolt, that jack nut starts to collapse on itself and it creates a threaded base. If you are wanting to put a riv nut, you can probably do so and it might be cleaner that way, but we didn't want to go through all that. They gave you the jack nuts and the jack nuts should be fine. But again, put some RTV silicone on that as well to also prevent leaks. And that's pretty much the install. It's actually really simple, very self-explanatory. It's just very time consuming, especially when you have to add all the rails using these self-tapping nuts that are up here. That's the part that took the longest because they're not that easy to get on there. I wish that FrontRunner would have had threaded bolts and you just kind of put them through, but I don't know why they went this way. I guess it makes it a little bit tighter, but these take a while, especially when you have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. You have 44 of those bolts that you got to do on both sides. Actually, no, 44, 48, counting the 2 here and the 2 on the other side as well. After that, though, bolting it down to the roof itself, really easy. All right, so I don't know how long you've been watching this video up until now, but I don't really care. We have a lot to talk about and there are definitely some things you guys need to know. Like, where do I even begin with this thing? All right, so first up, got the box. Open the box, there was hardware everywhere. I'm guessing the box was dropped, everything spilled out, and whoever was working at UPS just kind of grabbed whatever they could, throw it back in the box, because there was also some things in there that had nothing to do with the roof rack, like the caster wheel. Like, what the hell is that about? So it made me have to go to the hardware store, buy the parts that I was missing, except that there are a lot of parts that you just can't buy at the hardware store. So I contacted FrontRunner, told them what was going on. They apologized for the inconvenience and said they'll send me out the parts that I need, minus the parts I already bought at the hardware store, which is really odd to me, and it seems really cheap, right? Like, why not just send me the hardware kit just to make sure that all bases are covered versus trying to count out individual bolts to send me. I'm sure it's not going to cost you more to just send me an entire kit and be done with it, right? But you know what? I was going to leave it alone. I'm not going to get into an argument about it. It's not that big of a deal. I really just need the parts that I'm missing so that I can finally finish this rack once and for all. Well, after waiting about a week, I finally got the parts yesterday, except that they sent me the wrong bolts. How does that even happen? You know exactly what rack I have, so you'll know exactly what bolts I'm missing. I needed the M6 self-threading bolts. This is the self-threading bolt that you get with the kit, and you see it's rounded at the ends because when you put this on the rack, it sits flush against the bracket. Well, the bolt they sent was this one. And yeah, it's flat at the top and then it's curved in towards where the threads are. So this is not going to sit flush against those brackets. Like, this is not the right kind of bolt. In fact, at the top is an Allen head versus this, which is the hex kind of bolt head. Now I have to wait again. If you noticed in the B-rolls, some slats were still missing because I've already skipped out on releasing a video last week with the missing parts not coming in on time. I thought maybe I could release it this week, and then they sent the wrong bolts, and I'm like, I'm not going to push this off anymore. I'm just going to show you guys what's on the roof rack right now. And that's just one of the 3 major problems that I've had. Luckily, I've been able to fix the other 2 somehow. The second problem was noise. I know that roof racks sometimes will whistle, but this wasn't like a whistling noise. It was like a deep, very low-pitched noise that just pierced my ears, and it hurt so bad. Like, even when I turned the music up, you could still hear it. And what was really weird was that it got louder as you revved up, right? As you sped the vehicle up, it got louder, obviously, because the wind is coming. But then I would come to a stop, and the sound would still continue. Like, what is that? That cannot be like wind noise, because I'm sitting still and I could not figure out for the life of me what it was. So I'm like, all right, let me have my wife drive it to work the next day and she'll let me know. So she drove it to work the next day, and then once she got to work, she was like, that was painful. If it's gonna continue sounding like this, I don't want this rack at all. It almost gave me a migraine, and I felt really bad because this was a gift for her. But then on her way home from work, she said the sound stopped, like it was just gone. It just went away. And then we haven't heard it since. So I don't know what that was. I don't know if the rack just needed to settle a little bit and then it would go away, but we haven't heard the noise since. Just be advised that you might hear it in the first few times you drive it, but for us it went away. So luckily that's good. Now the third issue, it leaked. Now that's not really on FrontRunner. I'll get to that in just a bit. But the day after I installed the roof rack, my wife took it to work, and it just happened to be raining that day. And when she got out of work, she opened the door and she said the floors were wet, the seat was wet. I'm like, oh, luckily it was only on one side. The passenger side, completely dry. Driver's side, completely wet. And I'm like, oh, what is going on? So she came home and I put some more RTV to kind of surround it. And then I had to go out of town. And it just so happens that when I go out of town, that was the time that it's just been nonstop rain where we are. And every day my wife has had to go in the vehicle and dry it up. So I got home today, took the rack apart, tried to figure out why it was still leaking. And what I realized was that the jack nut on the driver's side was not completely clamped down. So no matter how much RTV I was putting on this thing, it wasn't secure to the metal, so it would rise up here and there, and so water would come seeping in and into the cabin. So I tightened that, put some more RTV, secured the rack again, and then I waited for the RTV to dry, and then I doused it with water, and I have not seen it leak anymore. But that's just today. So we're gonna wait maybe next week when it starts to rain again, and I'll see if it starts to leak. I am hoping that the leak problems are over. Oh, and there's a fourth issue that I forgot to mention, which is because this box was probably dropped, parts of the bracket, there were areas where the paint was chipping, and I already started seeing rust forming in those areas because this thing is made of steel. We live on the beach, so salt water is going to get to it. So I had to take some spray paint over those areas, but because whatever spray paint I use is not going to match the exact finish of the rack, I had to try to minimize where I spray painted as much as possible. You're not going to be able to tell, but I think what annoys me is the fact that I paid for a brand new rack and I've had all these issues already. The thing is, I just don't really want to regret this purchase, especially since I bought it for my wife. And I know that FrontRunner is much better than this. Like, I have a ton of FrontRunner stuff and have been nothing but happy with everything that I've gotten from them. I have the slimline rack on the Jeep and I've never had problems with leaks. I've never had problems with noise. I've never had problems with the install, with the parts being in its place. This just seems to be one of those one-offs where when it rains, it pours, no pun intended, type of situation, right? Look, once I finally get the parts that I'm missing and finish this rack once and for all, if the leak is actually gone and the noise doesn't return, I'll really be happy with the rack because it does look good. It looks really good. And for the price that you're paying, less than $1,000, and it's a FrontRunner name brand type of roof rack, like, you can't go wrong. Granted, you're not going to have the same kind of weight capacity that you will with the Slimline, but again, we're not going to need it for that. We just need it for regular cargo. This fits the bill. I just wish that all these issues didn't go down the way it did. Otherwise, I'll be completely happy. Once all of this is done, I'm going to be really happy. And I know my wife is going to be really happy with the rack too. It's one of those things where it just kind of got off on the wrong foot. And I'm hoping that anything I get from FrontRunner going forward, this doesn't happen anymore. But anyway, that's it. I really just wanted to give you guys an honest review of what went down with me in case this was a rack that you've been considering. I wish I had better news like to share, but unfortunately there were just a lot of issues that went down with this install that I wish didn't. I still think it's a great rack, and I think that what happened with me was just a one-off, and I'm sure that if you purchase this rack, when you open it, FrontRunner is really, really good at organizing all their parts. I'm sure yours is not going to be scattered everywhere, and as long as you do the install properly, make sure those jack nuts are secured, you're probably not going to get any leaks. And if you happen to have noise, then I hope that it's one of those things that it just needed to settle and it'll go away after a while. I love FrontRunner stuff. I just wish that this didn't happen with this particular install. So if you found this helpful, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and also consider supporting us on Patreon so we can continue to make more content like this. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at BaptismOverland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.